Chairman, first I've got a statement to make, and then I'll get into the question. I know some of the panel got a time limitation, but I'll try to be brief. The topic of information sharing has become a central theme of our investigation, as everybody here knows. I believe there is now unanimity on the need for our government, yes, our government, to consolidate and to manage all available information on the terrorist threat. Most Americans would probably be surprised to know that 1 year after the terrorist attacks of September the 11th, there is still no federal official, not a single one, to whom the President can turn to ask the simple question: what do we know about current terrorist threats against our homeland? A year later, no one person or entity has meaningful access to all such information that the government possesses. No one really knows what we know, and no one is even in a position to go to find out as of the time we're sitting here. This state of affairs, I believe, is deplorable, and it must end. In the information technology world, we're on the verge of dramatic new breakthroughs in data mining capabilities that are giving ordinary analysts an extraordinary ability, not just to search, but to analyze and to understand enormous quantities of data from a vast array of different data sources. The cutting edge of intelligence analysis, in other words, is likely to be in so-called crunching massive amounts of data on a genuinely all-source basis, drawing upon multiple data streams in ways never before possible, but possible today. However, as long as we have no one, Mr. Chairman, in a position to see all the many data streams that exist within the federal government, much less those that may also exist in the state and local arena and in the thriving information economy of the private sector, all of these rapidly advancing data mining and analytical tools will be of little use to us. Already, Mr. Chairman, it has been one of our frustrations on this committee to see the degree to which even agencies that acknowledge the importance of interagency electronic information sharing are each independently, yes, independently, pursuing separate answers to this problem. We heard a little of it today. Even their responses to the problem of agency-specific stovepipes are too often themselves stovepiped responses. The DCI's own initiative to create an intelligence community-wide intelligence community system for information sharing depends wholly upon agencies deciding what information they think other agencies' analysts need to know. Every agency will be charged with populating its own shared space that will be searchable by clear and accredited online users. No outsider, it seems, would ever have access to an agency's real databases. This is exactly the type of thinking that I think we must purge from our intelligence community. We need new ideas and a genuine appreciation in the community's top management of information technology and how it can be exploited to attack the target. Mr. Chairman, as we saw last week, the most innovative ideas put forth by our witnesses were more money and more people. Yes, more money and more people. Unless we see some new thinking and leadership within the intelligence community, Mr. Chairman, I believe that more money and more people will get us, yes, more of the same. That we do not need. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to submit for the record an article by Stan Hawthorne entitled "Knowledge Related to a Purpose, Data Mining to Detect Terrorism." This article, I believe, effectively discusses the need to integrate our information systems, and I commend it to my colleagues. I have a copy here for the record, and I'll give it.
The document will be entered in the record.
Mr. Andrew, In your remarks earlier, you suggested that there might be problems with information sharing, in part because of overly restrictive interpretations by intelligence community lawyers of the existing law and executive orders. Do you think progress in information sharing has been impeded by the development of a mythology of restrictions that encourages day-to-day, hour-to-hour decision makers to assume more barriers exist than actually do exist?
Yes, sir, I do. I mean, that was the point I was making, that there's nothing wrong with the laws, but the interpretations have unduly constrained us in receiving some information.
And you've seen examples of that, have you not?
Yes, sir.
How can we, on this committee and members of the Senate and the House, how can we dispel any such myths and focus on what the law actually provides? Is that a question of education of the people involved in the various agencies?
Yes, sir, I believe it is. The word culture was mentioned a number of times, and I think it's very understandable over the past couple of decades how we've gotten so afraid to touch certain categories of information. I mean, as was mentioned, there were penalties for crossing that line. I think we have an initiative within the Department of Defense to go out and educate the Inspector Generals, the General Counsels, and the intelligence oversight people as to what the law really says and how, in today's threat environment, it might be interpreted.
You were not here last week, but you may have followed the hearing, but there was a lot of confusion about the criteria for FISA. And even some of the witnesses, I believe Chairman Graham asked some questions on this and others too, that maybe some of the FBI lawyers didn't really understand the criteria for FISA that they were dealing with every day. And that we were astounded here. But I bet you've seen that in the community yourself, have you not?
In spades, yes, sir. And it's trickled down to every level. The analysts have been conditioned not to ask for certain kinds of information. Well, we're changing that, and they're getting more aggressive.
They should ask for anything that has probative value to what they're doing,
Yes, sir. And when they're being told no, we're pushing it up and pushing it up the hill. And, you know, what we have to do is mount an aggressive assault on all sources of information, and that's exactly what we're attempting.
And how do we do all source information, that is, bring all relevant information regarding a possible terrorist strike or anything from every quarter to a single collective source? Is that correct?
Yes, sir. And
that's easier said than done, but it has to be done, doesn't it?
Sir, because the understandings of the laws, the interpretations of the laws create seams that the bad guys understand and they take advantage of. I am convinced of that.
But as long as you have all these separate kingdoms, or whatever you want to call them, you will never have a fusion of information consistently at the right time, at the right place, will you?
No, sir.
Mr. Andre, Acting Director Jacoby, and this was touched on earlier today, but I just want to be clear, said in his statement for the record that we need a paradigm shift in the ownership of information within the intelligence community. Those strong words, but they have meaning. Rather than allowing the agency who collected information to control which analysts are permitted to see this information, Admiral Jacoby suggested, as I understand, that we need to ensure that ownership of information resides with analysts. Is this DIA's official position, or would you like to elaborate on this?
I don't know that it needs much elaboration. It is certainly...
Speaks for itself, doesn't it?
Yes, sir, it does.
What steps do we need to take here in the Congress to create a system which analysts are empowered to access any information they need in order to do their job? Because that's the key, isn't it? All bits of information coming together in a collective mode makes the whole, doesn't it?
Yes, sir.
You have some suggestions in what we...
If I were king, which I'm not even a minor warlord, I would...
Well, let's make you the crown prince for
Yes,
the
sir.
sake of conversation.
What I would start with is information standards. That's the starting point, because in order to start managing our information collectively, we've got to put the information into a form that it can be managed. We are not there today. We believe in DIA that standard is, as was mentioned earlier, extensible markup language, XML. We don't have to achieve systems interoperability, which would cost a lot of money and cause a lot of pain. But if we have data interoperability, even if the data were to reside in separate repositories, when we're working...
Go over that again. I think this is a very important point, just because you're not just talking to the committee here, you're probably talking to the world, and at least the American people. Explain what you're talking about again.
Yes, sir. Much like occurs in the commercial sector, we wouldn't have to own or control or maintain a single data repository that has all the data. If the data were appropriately configured, empowered, and content tagged, that's not tagged at a record level with security classification and authorship, but the meaning of what's in that. The data, law enforcement data, for example, could be in one pot. Sensitive compartmented information could be in a second pot. Unclassified data could be in a third pot. What we're really talking about is a giant server farm. We have the analytic discovery technologies, the relational tools, and the mining technology to search across those data repositories as long as the data are compatible. I think, and I'm not an expert, I'm not an IT person, but I've been told we can resolve many of the security concerns and concerns with things like discovery by keeping them segregated, but that when one's working a threat issue or an offensive option issue, that they can search across all those data repositories and continue to not only find linkages in the data, but begin mapping that knowledge by tagging it at the analytic level for the benefit of the next person that accesses that little piece of data. That's knowledge mapping.
Where they don't start all over.
They don't start all over. We start capturing the collective expertise of any analyst that scrutinized that data and left his or her fingerprint on it.
All source ought to mean all source, shouldn't it?
Well, yes, sir. I think I was pretty emphatic about putting the all back into all source data.
Commissioner Norris, first of all, I want to thank you for being here today. Your oral and your written statements were disturbing to me, and I suspect to my colleagues. Is it your assessment that the federal government is the impediment to information sharing among local, state, and federal agencies? And if so, why is this the case?
I think, well, it is my assertion, and we rely on them almost completely for comparative analysis of data we uncover, information that'll help us protect our cities. And again, we don't need the sources and methods, we just need to know what the threat is for operational reasons. But I think what has been said here before, it's certainly not the people at the street level. You know, they do their job no matter what. It's just, and it's not as much an IT problem from my perspective. I think it's what has been spoken about before a couple of times. It's a cultural problem. And it's this culture of secrecy, I guess, and withholding information. And, you know, and I think people hide behind the fact that, you know, they, a lot more than they should have, that they can't disclose information. Things are classified too often that need not be. Most information can be unclassified.
They can't disclose some stuff. They can't help you, can they? That's
right. And a lot of stuff that, you know, it's very hard to declassify something. But, you know how long that takes and what a process it is. But if something need not be classified in the first place, it shouldn't be. And a lot of information is basically, you know, should be out there for our consumption. And these are just some of the problems we're encountering. This is, you know, and we're not unlike a lot of other American cities. The problem we're encountering now is getting people to be vocal about it. I don't know why people are being, frankly, so quiet and polite about it. We mean no disrespect when we say we're not getting the help. We just want to speak the truth and get some relief in our cities, our urban populated areas. And unfortunately, you know, while many of my colleagues will complain privately very loud that they're not getting anything, they have no idea, and when confronted or asked, "Well, how's everything going?" they smile, say things are great. You know, and there's a couple of vocal police chiefs around the United States who have been sticking their necks out, and you know, frankly, there's a handful that have been saying this publicly. But I can assure you, this is felt privately by many, many
We
more.
appreciate your candor. In the past year, how many times have you asked the FBI to brief you on Baltimore area terrorism investigations? Roughly.
A couple of times. We just never got the briefing. The first one was,
Has the FBI ever provided that briefing?
no, not yet. But I'd like to know, my question is, I'd like to know exactly what is being worked
Sure.
on in my city.
You believe that this same situation that you have in Baltimore is being repeated in other cities throughout the country?
I know that.
Sure. Is this basically a cultural problem with the Bureau?
That's a question you may have to ask the other side, but that's my feeling. It is, yeah. I see no reason why that as chiefs of major American cities, you know, and I know we had this discussion here in Washington with Chief Ramsey and others, and Timothy was with Philly. And we have people working on task forces. They're detectives working on joint terrorism task forces that can't even tell us what they're working on, and they work for us. You know, if you can't trust your police chiefs in your major cities, maybe they shouldn't be there. You know, if that's the case, you know, we have a big problem here. We need to know what's going on in our jurisdictions.
We need to solve that problem working together. Mr. Greene, we understand that prior to September the 11th, that the CIA refused to provide the names of suspected terrorists to the INS unless the agency believed that these terrorists were actually coming to the United States. Only then would the CIA bother to put names into the State Department and INS computer databases that are designed to look out for suspected terrorists. After September the 11th, we understand that the CIA changed its policy and gave the State Department and INS a great many names of suspected terrorists that it had refused to share for a long time. How many new names appeared in the INS database just after September the 11th when the CIA stopped withholding information like that?
Mr. Shelby, I can tell you that over the last year, the number of names that have been entered into the tip-off system are a little over 14,000.
14,000.
The majority of those are terrorism-related, although some of the tip-off stuff relates to Russian organized crime.
But before September the 11th, this was not happening.
No, that's correct, sir.
The Joint Inquiry staff has identified, Mr. Greene, over 1,000, yes, 1,000 CIA documents containing terrorist names that were not provided to the State Department and INS databases before September the 11th. I'm asking you the obvious question. Do you believe these names should have been shared?
Yes, sir, I do.
If the names of the two hijackers from San Diego had been in your database earlier, would your agents possibly have been able to stop them upon their arrival at the U.S. port of entry?
We think there is a likelihood that that could have happened, yes, sir.
But you didn't have those names, did you?
Correct.
They were not given to you.
That's correct.
This information was not shared.
That's correct.
Governor Gilmore, what are the appropriate limits, if any, upon the nature and extent of intelligence information that should be shared with state and local government officials involved in counterterrorism work? In other words, what's the best way to structure such information sharing? You've been the governor of a big state.
Senator Shelby, the philosophy that the Commission has taken in advising the Congress is the key importance of a partnership between the federals, the states, and the locals, because they're all doing different types of activities. Information is largely gained from international sources only at the federal level, but a lot of information is gained into the overall system from police chiefs, fire departments, state police, narcotics investigators, people all over the United States that reach far beyond any place that the federal government can possibly go because of limitations of resources. So once the concept is adopted that it's a total partnership in order to create a national strategy, then the question is, what type of information, as you ask, and how should that go? And the answer is, I think that you can give the information to give reasonable information and warning and analytical ability to people at the states and the local areas, and they can give information back again as well. And there are safeguards that apply today to federal intelligence organizations, could easily be applied up and down, vertically up and down the line. I think the information that the states and localities want is what is the nature of warnings and threats information that has been obtained, how legitimate is it, how does it impact on the activities of people at the state and local level. And that then allows the states and locals to become more of a partner in the overall protection of the people of the United States.